when you look at how Jesus communicated, again, if you're watching this and you don't love Jesus, you still got to pay attention to how this man, this God man, talked to the world to get a message to continue to be pervasive and permeate society this many years later. Jesus had a big message. He had a massive purpose. His destiny was intense. Bring this message to the whole world. He left us with a great commission, which was bring this to all nations and all people. That the goal was that every tongue, so at this point, however many that is, 8 billion tongues would declare. They would confess that Jesus is Lord, that every knee would bow. It's a lot of knees. If you're talking about 2 knees, that would be 14 to 16 billion knees bowing that Jesus is the only way. Big message. A lot of people really have a problem with that there's one way. And that was what he was doing through all the doctor's reports that he did, all of his exams and consultations and everything that he took people through was to help them understand he is the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords. And there's one way, one truth, and one life, and that is him. So that's a powerful, powerful message that he was getting across. And so it's really fascinating, like whether you are a Christian or not, or people that have worked in academia and just looked at communication and how do you start a movement or get a message out there. Many people have studied the Bible just to look at this one man and how he got a message to the world like no other message has ever gotten to the world, that he inspired those around him to take what he left after going back and ascending to go and continue that purpose and that mission and to continue to establish that destiny. No one's ever pulled that off before like he has. It's pretty amazing. Here we are over 2,000 years later, and it's going stronger than ever. As many of you know, I've been working with the Billion Soul Initiative for over 20 years. They don't even call themselves the Billion Soul Initiative anymore because that was too small a number. They went past the billion really quickly, and now it's the global church because they're bringing this message to the globe, and they can pinpoint on a map, the little villages and the little places in some faraway land in the woods where here's a handful of people groups we haven't gotten the message of Jesus Christ to, and we're going to get it to them. One way or another, we're going to get the message to the world that we will fulfill the Great Commission in this lifetime. That is the goal of the global church, and they are doing it because, as Dr. Davis would say, who comes in, by the way, and gets adjusted right here where I sit every single week, as he would say, we've only got one lifetime. It's the only one we have. Why not use it to fulfill the greatest commandment of all time? Go make disciples of all nations. So that being said, when you look at how Jesus communicated, again, if you're watching this and you don't love Jesus, you still got to pay attention to how this man, this God man, talked to the world to get a message to continue to be pervasive and permeate society this many years later. And continues to grow and is in millions of books that are written and radio shows and music. And you just look how this message keeps getting out there. I know I'm beating up this point, but it's just so fascinating. That's why I know it is God. How could anything work that well for this long and just keep going up? There aren't any legacies that men have left behind that just keep escalating and blowing up further and further, and more from art to science to media to music and arts and the academic community, like just growing this many years later. Someone knew how to speak, someone knew how to communicate, someone knew how to educate at a God level, at a supernatural level. And that person is Jesus Christ, none other than our Lord and Savior. And so let's talk about some of the things. I'm just going to really get into, one of the ways he communicated. A lot of us know, we've heard this before. He spoke in parables, he spoke in stories, and hopefully many of you have learned that. Anyone that's ever heard me speak knows I leverage all my points. I get my methods and themes and meanings across through stories. It's important for the people to break it down and understand. It gets me in the right mood and posture and position to communicate an important message. And so there's just nothing better than a story. That's not even the point I'm making today, but just to finalize this idea on story, I actually tested this out one time. We went, me and a group of doctors went and listened to a speaker at one of these Saturday Night Lives that was occurring in Florida. And so the speaker talked for an hour. So I waited. It was about an hour and a half ride home. And I waited till we were about an hour away. And I said to everybody in the car, can anybody tell me anything that you just heard? And I said, leave out the stories. And nobody, here we are an hour after, and we're doctors listening to doctors, an hour after, nobody could really give, a real lucid, pragmatic description of any particular thing that was said. And we could kind of pull out some topics and some points, but nobody could really get into what was said. Nobody could repeat it, except for, then I said, how about the stories? And the person had only told a couple, and we could all tell the entire story from start to finish. We could all tell it as well as the speaker had told it an hour earlier, because your body, your brain somehow absorbs and memorizes and breaks down and really gets stories. It's just how our brains are designed to work. When I meet God one day, I could probably ask him all about that. So that being said, when we talk about the idea of story, how do we get any point in the story to actually get across? This is the one thing that Jesus did that I do want to share today. And so that one thing that he did, that very powerful thing that he did, is he put something hard, something aggressive, something abrasive or even abusive into all of his stories. That there was a way he made a point that truly got that point across. And so, as an example, his disciples once said, wow, Jesus, that was a little heavy. Who could really do much with that story and stick around? And so Jesus picks up on this and he's like, you guys want to go, then go. But this is how I'm getting my story across, because I'm not trying to get it to you. I'm trying to get it for generation to generation to be heard and to be sustained and reach billions of people over centuries or over millennia. That's why I'm telling the story the way I'm telling it. So, he said, unless you drink my blood and eat my flesh, you're not my follower. Like, the disciples like, who could possibly commit to that? That seems a little intense, Jesus. And Jesus like, well, that's how I'm saying it. He says it with a boldness. He is the Lion of Judah. There's aggression to it so that it sticks. So it's not just some story. I've heard a lot of stories from speakers that I'm like, yeah, maybe snip a little bit off the beginning and the end, at the bottom and the top, and let's break this thing down a little tighter. It's kind of boring, doesn't really get the point across, and too soft. For some of you, your personality is a bit softer, and there's an advantage to that. So somebody might say there's only disadvantage. There's an advantage to a softer personality, because you can actually leverage that. So when you do hit them hard with a story or a point, they get it. They actually hear it more than maybe somebody like me, who tends to come across a little bit aggressive from the get. So let's talk about what we mean by a strong, aggressive, even abrasive point. So in science, we know that as a result of the times we live in, so we live in this information age that's actually evolved into what I call, I don't know if anybody else has coined this term, but I've been saying this for about 7 or 8 years. Well, what I call the over-information age, that people are over-informed. They have more information they can handle. What science has shown is that as a result, people are naturally filtering out the vast majority of what they hear. But what's worse for us, not only are they filtering out what they're hearing, but they're filtering out most of the meaning. And that's more important. It's not just that when you speak, they're writing off like 80% of it and just letting it bounce off, or doing what's called heuristics and turning it all into a rule of thumb. So they're, okay, you're a chiropractor, you crack my neck, you make my back feel better. So you're explaining subluxation, the nervous system, the function of the organs, and all they're hearing is chiropractor, crack my back, make my back feel better. That's called heuristics. They're just going with a rule of thumb, and they quickly filter anything you say into their rule of thumb. I've already categorized you as to what you do and how much you cost and how valuable I think you are and how urgent I think the situation is, so that no matter what you say, I've relegated you down to this small point. So you have to understand, everyone you talk to, that's what's going on. And you might be missing that. So you're there going, well, I already said that. I already sent the email. I texted them. I've already got that point across. Why are they not starting? Why are they quitting? It must just be them. And I hear that all the time. It's these people, or they're not getting it, or it's my area, or they didn't have the money, or it was the insurance issue, or their previous experience with chiropractic. And I hear it all. But the reality is you did not get the meaning of what you had to say across to them because of filters, because of heuristics, and they're just ultimately ignoring much of what you're saying and gathering no true urgency from it. So there's a way to overcome that, and it gets right back to when Jesus says, drink my blood and eat my flesh. He knew, I've got to break out what I call the big sledgehammer. So the reason I have that metaphor for myself is in my garage, there's a tire, and next to that tire, there's a 5-pound sledgehammer for the newbies. There's a 10-pound sledgehammer. Then there's the 15-pound sledgehammer. That's the one I use. And so when you use the 5-pound one, it's exercise. It hits the tire, but it's light. The other one's a little heavier, but still doesn't pack that much of a punch. But when you pick up that big one, it hits that, it's hard to do over and over again. If you do it 100 times, it's pretty intense. And, it makes a loud noise. It bothers the neighbors or wakes up the kids if you do it in the morning. When it's the big one, it makes noise. It wakes people up. Makes noise, wakes people up. Now, Jim Rohn would say, take that 15-pound sledgehammer, and on the end of it, you would tape a nail. Because if you really want to get the point across and get it through somebody's thick skull, and BJ used to talk about how hard it was to get things through a 1/4 inch of skull, then you tape a nail to the end of that sledgehammer, and that's the type of words, terminology, stories that you tell. If you want them to actually not just hear something and, again, heuristically relegate it down to some minor message that they're not really all that interested in or going to have a passive or mild commitment to, versus somebody getting the meaning, taking action, and remaining in action, actually sustaining what you're saying. So as an example, one that I went through actually several times with clients today, particularly ones that have a softer disposition. They're more of that I type of personality, that it bothers them to think that they might say something that might be overly bold or overly aggressive, because when you're a higher I, you care what people think. You don't want to offend people. You might say something's overly bold. Like for me, as an example, when it comes to getting spouses in to a report, generally I expect it. Part of good communication is just to expect objection and not let it dissuade you from continuing and staying committed to the outcome. I expect a lot of people to say, no, my spouse won't come. And they'll give me whatever reason. I don't really care, because I'm going to stay the course and say, they're going to want to come. I'm sure they care about you. I'm sure they love you. And I know they'd want to see what's on these x-rays and find out what it's doing to your health, your body, and your future, and find out what has to be done about it. The commitment financially, what you have to do here and at home, the time commitment. They're going to want to know all that, because they care and it impacts their life. They want to be here. So I turn the tables. Yes, they want to be here. And if they say, well, I don't know, I'll be like, listen, if I'm talking to a woman, I'd say, if my wife had a problem that was as bad as your problem is, and she told me about it and said I had to come to see the doctor with her, if I say, forget if I say, if I don't immediately tell her I'm coming, I'm already in trouble. Never mind say, why do I have to go? If I say, why do I have to go? I'm sleeping in a hotel for 6 weeks, and we're in counseling, so I'll get into it with patients that deeply. But I've had other doctors say, oh, that's too bold. Well, that's because you use a 5-pound sledgehammer that doesn't work. I use the 15-pound sledgehammer with the nail at the end, which works. And so 99 times out of 100, that wife or that husband brings their spouse, and we get that whole family under care. And other people are saying, oh, well, people don't want to bring their spouse. You don't understand that their spouse works out of town, or they don't believe in chiropractic. They've had a bad experience. So a lot of you are just getting beat up by the excuse of why they won't bring their spouse in. I'm having success just like Jesus with my 15-pound sledgehammer with the nail at the end. Another example, again, getting back to kind of the soft-spoken person that may be concerned with offending somebody. First of all, for many of you, you could never offend anybody. You're nice. You're clearly kind and loving and compassionate. People like you naturally. That's the case for a lot of you. Some of you, it's not the case. It's not the case for me. I don't think people naturally think I'm nice or they naturally like me. I have to win people over. I could be a little bit, in your face. Or maybe just because I'm a short redheaded guy. I don't know, but I don't think people like me quickly. But a lot of my clients are like, wow, I love you and I don't even know you. And I believe that's how your patients are going to be. And so you have an advantage. You probably can't say anything that they won't take the right way. And I feel like I can say anything because they know, even though, again, maybe I'm not immediately likable like some of you, that they know it's for the right reason. It's because I want to help them. It's not because I'm trying to talk them into something. And so one thing that I was walking through with a patient or a client rather today with a patient is the patient said, I only need a little care. So I've been to the chiropractor, maybe I'll get like 2 visits and you can fix it. And the person was really aggressive. And so the chiropractor that I was talking to agreed. Okay, I guess I'll see you twice and we'll just charge you for 2 visits. You'll be gone. So she lost the fight, and the fight isn't conversion. The fight is to save this person's life. I'm not trying to win for me and my clinic. I've got plenty of people coming in and we'll make plenty of money. I'm trying to win for the person. Now I'm thinking if we don't get this person started with whatever condition they have going on, that can hurt them now, later, not just pain and continued degeneration, but it could take their life, especially because they don't know how to live chiropractically. It's a way of life. So that's how my brain's working. So I asked her, I said, well, tell me more about the person's problem. And so she said, which is what I would ask the person. I would say, tell me more about your problem. And I always agree with the person first. This is the process of communication, as I agree. Okay, yeah, maybe you only need 1-2 adjustments. And in fact, that's what I hope it is. I hope this is so simple. You'd only need 1 or 2 adjustments. You start with agreeing with them, not fighting with them. Reggie Gold used to take their entrance form, crumble it up and throw it in the garbage and say, now let me tell you why you're really here. That's asking for a fight. And Reggie was a good fighter, so he probably won most of the time. He's brilliant. But, the ideal communication is we agree. We start from a point of agreement. They even do this, by the way, like if you go to buy a car and you say, I want the littlest, cheapest car, those salesmen are trained to say, great, yeah, that there'd be nothing I would love more than for you to walk out of here at the least expense. So let's take a look at that. But then from there, it's their job to show you why that little car at the lowest price has limitations. These tires won't last. That engine's not going to make it. You said you had kids. You're going to squeeze them back there. What if you took a trip? Where are you putting the luggage? So they begin to, say, hey, maybe you might consider this size vehicle. These tires will last longer. That'll save you $1,000 right there. Got a place for the luggage. Dog can sit in the back with the kids. You can take a friend with those kids to school. There's a reason for this. The radio works. It actually takes, you can use XM in this one. The other one didn't even do XM. They just grow until you realize, okay, yeah, it probably is a better idea to have the next size up for a few $100 more a month. Well, a similar thing here. I hope you need 1 adjustment. Hopefully it's that little of a deal. I hope you're that healthy, but tell me about the condition. So, started 15 years ago. Oh, wow. 15 years ago. Did you ever fully correct it and stabilize it where it was completely gone? No, I never did that. So how often does it bother you? Fairly frequently. Wow, fairly frequently. So you've got continual problems with a nerve in your spinal cord, which, by the way, where else do those nerves go? Well, it looks like it was my heart. Well, you said it's been around a while, 15, 20 years. How's your heart been functioning for 15, 20 years? Not good. How is it now? You've never you said you never resolved the problem. How's your heart right now? Probably pretty bad. Well, if you don't finally resolve it, where's your heart going to be? So right away, they begin to shift. And it turns out with this particular patient I'm talking about, he was actually feeling it down his arm. So I would have, now this is my wrap up. So I'm going to talk from a Jesus perspective, and I'm going to break out the drink the blood and eat the flesh. I'm going to talk about the 15-pound sledgehammer with the nail tied at the end. So here's how I would say it. So you're saying it's traveling. Really, it's metastasizing. A lot of you are going to say, wow, it's a harsh word. Again, I'm trying to not have my words filter. I don't want heuristics to take me out and stop this person from getting the care they need. So I'm going to go, you're saying essentially that the nerve damage is so bad, it's metastasizing down the arm like a cancer would. Then I'll ask them, have you ever known anybody who thought they had resolved their cancer? They even said they were in remission, but then it turns out it was never really gone, and it all came back, was worse, and they died. Have you heard that story or known anybody? Yes, I've heard the story. Yes, that happened to my uncle Larry. Well, listen, it's the same thing here. You've had adjustments. You're saying you think you only needed a couple, but you've never resolved the problem. And just like a cancer, it then grows. It causes damage to the cord, damage to the nerves, and it's metastasizing, as you said, out to your heart and down your arm. This thing has gotten really far along. This really needs some care. Don't you think you should take this seriously? So because I used the sledgehammer versus this woman who was, wasn't even using a 5-pounder. She was just, oh, okay, well, if you only want a couple of visits, I could see why that might be. We went from that soft, ineffective, filtered language to the sledgehammer. My point would get across and I'd get them to commit. By the way, I also get their spouse to come and see the x-rays now that they understand how serious it could be. And for them to understand why their whole family needs care. So this woman who was soft-spoken, using more probably like a light rubber mallet than a sledgehammer, got nowhere. And the guy eventually only got one adjustment. He didn't even do the second adjustment. I've got a whole family that started who's getting the help that they need. So there's a big difference. And so, one doesn't work. One gets your point across, changes a life, saves other lives, and leaves a legacy where we are fulfilling a mission, a commission over time that has a lasting purpose in this world. So stories, sledgehammers, break through the filters. By the way, I'll finish with this. When you feel like you're being overly bold, you have to realize if you're bringing a 100-pound sledgehammer, their filter brings it down to 20 pounds. They're going to filter at 80 pounds of force. So if you're at a 20-pound sledgehammer, there's hardly anything left by the time your point is being given. Because if you're at 100 pounds, they're always filtering some, even if that nail's tied to the end, they're filtering some of it. So are you light and having virtually all of the meaning filtered out? Or are you bold enough? Do you love enough? Do you care enough? Jesus told us that no greater love is this than he who will sacrifice his life for a friend. Are you willing to sacrifice personality, concern, fear, this lack of boldness? Will you sacrifice that to save the life of a person, their family, and everyone they will touch throughout history? Bless you guys. Have fun saving the world and fulfilling the great commission of our Lord of Lords. Bless you, and remember who you are.